Hello girls, welcome back. Today we are going to begin with our next lesson of English literature. That is Lesson 2, The Visit to the Mansion. Do you all know what is a mansion? A mansion means a large impressive house. The story is about Jo March and Laurie. Jo March used to live in an old brown house, whereas Laurie used to live in a very big mansion. Children, I just told you what is the meaning of mansion, isn't it? Yes, it means a large, impressive house. So, these two were neighbors, Jo and Laurie. Jo always wanted to make friends with Laurie. But Laurie, he looked shy and lonely. So one day, Jo decided to visit the mansion and tell Mr. Lawrence to allow Laurie to come out of the house and play. Now children, let's read the story together and see what happens when Jo visits the mansion. So children, now let's read. Open your books. We'll understand Lesson 2, The Visit to the Mansion. Before we start reading, let me tell you something about the author. Louisa May Alcott was one of the most renowned American authors of her time. Her most famous novel, Little Women, was based on her childhood with her three sisters. So, Louisa May, she had three sisters, okay? And the story is based on her childhood. Alcott's family, just like the March family, faced financial difficulties. So, Alcott had to work from an early age to support her family. Writing became a way for her to express her emotions and her creativity. So children, we'll read the story. The story is based on Louisa May's life. One snowy afternoon, Jo saw Mr. Lawrence drive off. She set out towards the mansion and looked around. It was completely quiet. So, one afternoon, it was very snowy and Jo saw Mr. Lawrence drive off. Who was Mr. Lawrence? He was Laurie's grandfather. So, he had gone out somewhere. So, Jo decided to go to the mansion and make friends with Laurie. She went over there and she looked here and there. It was completely quiet. Suddenly, she spotted a curly head leaning against a desk at an upper window. There he is, thought Jo. Poor boy. I'll toss up a snowball and make him look out. All of a sudden, she saw Laurie near the window, but he was looking somewhere else. So, what Jo did? She tossed up a snowball to make him look out. Can you all see over here? The snowball she tossed up so that he looks down. Up went a ball of snow and the head turned at once. Laurie peeped out, eyes bright with wonder. When he spotted Jo, he began to smile. Then, as the ball went up, Laurie turned at once. He peeped out. He smiled as he saw Jo. He was very happy to see Jo. Jo called out, How do you do? Are you sick? Then Jo, she asked him, Are you okay? Or you are sick? Laurie croaked hoarsely. Croaked hoarsely means spoke in a deep, harsh voice because of a painful throat. When you have bad cold, that time how your voice becomes no very harsh. So croaked hoarsely means that. I have a bad cold and it's very dull here. Will you come upstairs and talk to me, please? Then Laurie replied with a harsh voice. He said, I have a bad cold. Will you come upstairs and talk to me? I'll ask mother. Wait. Then Jo replied. She said, Wait, I will ask my mother. Now, turn the page, children. So then, excited Laurie flew about to get ready and tidy his room. Flew about means ran around in great hurry. A little later, there was a loud ring followed by quick footsteps. Then there was a knock on his door, and Jo appeared. She was carrying a covered dish in one hand and three kittens in the other. So, what had happened? Laurie was very excited. He was excited to meet Jo as he never had friends before. He started to clear his room, and a little later, Jo knocks at his door. She brings a covered dish along with her in one hand and three kittens in the other hand. So, what is she holding, children, in her hand? Yes, a covered dish in one hand and three kittens in the other. Here I am, she said briskly. Mother sent her love. Meg sent some of her delicious blancmange, and Beth thought her cats would be comforting. I knew you would laugh at them, but I couldn't refuse. Children, briskly means with a lot of energy, and blancmange is a sweet dish made with corn flour, sugar, and milk. So, Jo, she was very excited. With a lot of energy, she said, Here I am. My mother has sent her love for you. Meg has sent blancmange for you, which is a sweet dish. And Beth has sent her kittens to comfort you. I knew you would laugh, but I could not say no to them. She said that she could not say no to her mother and her sisters. The kittens turned out to be just the thing as Laurie started laughing over them and soon grew cheerful. Then soon Laurie became very happy watching the kittens play. That looks too pretty to eat, he said, smiling as Jo showed him the blancmange. It is soft and will slip down without hurting your sore throat, said Jo. So then Laurie said, looking at the sweet dish, that it looks very pretty. Jo says, it will not hurt your throat. You will enjoy eating it. How kind you are, said Laurie. Now please take the big chair and let me do something to entertain you. Entertain means, children, to do something to make a guest enjoy himself or herself. So then Laurie said, "How kind are you, Jo? Now please take the big chair. I will do something to make you happy or to make you enjoy." "No, no, you should rest. Shall I read to you?" asked Jo, looking at some books nearby. "I have read all of them, and if you don't mind, I would like to talk," answered Laurie. So then what happens? Jo says, "No, you are not well. You should rest." Looking around at some books, she says, "If you say, I will read to you." So Laurie says, "No, I have read all these. I would just like to talk to you." "Not a bit," Beth says. "I keep talking all day and never know when to stop." "Is Beth the rosy one who sometime goes out with a little basket?" asked Laurie with interest. So then what happens? Jo said, "No, I don't mind talking to you. In fact, Beth says that I talk a lot and I don't know when to stop." So then Laurie says, he asked Jo that, "Is Beth the rosy one, your sister with who moves around outside with a little basket?" So Jo said, "Yes, she is Beth." "The pretty one is Meg, and the curly haired one is Emmy, I believe." Laurie paused. He then added shyly, "I often hear you talking to each other. Sometimes, when I see you all sitting around the table with your mother, it's like looking at a picture." Laurie poked the fire to hide the sudden trembling of his lips. So then Laurie said, "I guess the pretty one is Meg, and the one with the curly hair is Emmy." Then shyly he said, "I have often seen you sitting around." Then shyly he said, "I have often seen you sitting around the table with your mother and talking to each other. And it's so beautiful to watch you all sitting like this." Can you see this picture, children? It looks so beautiful, isn't it? Yes. Sooner he realized what Jo might be thinking of him, that he used to stand outside their house and watch them. Can you see? Here he is standing. This is Laurie and this is Jo's family, her mother and her sisters, and how they are sitting around the table and talking. So what he did then, he moved away from there and started poking sticks in the to make the fire burn. Okay, poked the fire means move the wood in a fire with a long stick to make it burn brightly. Jo was touched while he was unwell and lonely. She was happy at home with her mother and sisters. "You could just come and visit us," she said gently. "Mother would be glad to welcome you, and you'll have jolly times with my sisters and me. Wouldn't your grandpa let you?" So then Jo was very touched and felt sorry for Laurie. She said to him, "When you were unwell and lonely, I was enjoying at home with my mother and sisters. I am very upset. But forget what has happened, and from now on, you can come to my place. My mother would be very happy to welcome you, and you will enjoy a lot with my sisters and me." "But will your grandpa allow you to come?" she asked. "I think he would if I asked. He's very kind, but he thinks I might disturb strangers, said Laurie. So then Laurie says, I think he will if I ask him. He is a very kind person, but he just feels that I might disturb strangers. We are not strangers. We are your neighbors, and you won't disturb us. So then Jo says, no, we are not strangers. We are your neighbors, and you will not disturb us. Then Jo and Laurie started talking about books. Jo was delighted to find that Laurie also loved books and had read more books than her. Then what happened? Jo and Laurie, they both started talking about books. And Jo was very happy to know that Laurie also loves to read books. In fact, he had read a lot more of books than her. Now children, we'll move to the next page. If you like them so much, come down to our library, Laurie offered. Grandpa isn't home. Don't be afraid. I'm not afraid of anything, Jo replied, tossing her head. So Laurie said he offered Jo to come and visit his grandpa's library. He said, Jo, don't be afraid. My grandfather is not at home. Then she shook her head and replied, no, no, I'm not afraid. Laurie laughed and led her through the rooms. He let her examine whatever struck her fancy. At last, they reached the library where Jo clapped her hands and danced with delight. Children, examine means to check with interest. Struck her fancy means made her curious. So then Laurie, he laughed and said, okay, come on, let's go to the library. So while they were walking towards the library, they had to pass a few rooms. So Jo, whatever she saw on her way, like paintings, statues, decorations, etc., she was watching them with curiosity. Curiosity means with interest. And as soon as they reached the library, she was so happy that she started dancing and clapping her hands. It was lined with books. Lined with books means filled with many rows of books. And then there were pictures and statues, strange little tables and bronze pieces. And best of all, a great open fireplace with quaint tiles all around it. Quaint tiles means pretty and old-fashioned. So what was there in the library? Pictures and statues, strange little tables, bronze pieces, fireplace with quaint tiles, okay? Pretty and old-fashioned tiles around it. What richness, sighed Jo, sinking into a chair. Sinking into a chair means lowering herself gently into a chair and gazing around her. So, Jo, she said, what richness, Laurie? Wow, like this she said. And then she started looking at everything around her. Theodore Lawrence, you should be the happiest boy in the world. So what was Laurie's actual name? Theodore Lawrence. So she said, Theodore Lawrence, you are so lucky. You should be the happiest boy in this world because you have everything. No one can live on books, said Laurie, shaking his head as he perched on a table. Children, perched means sat on a narrow surface. So Laurie, he shook his head and he sat on a narrow surface and said that no one can live on books. I may be having so many books over here, but I cannot live on them. Just then, a bell rang and Jo flew up, alarmed. Flew up means stood up very fast. It's your grandpa? What shall I do? So, what happened then? A bell rang and Jo, she just stood up very fast. And then she asked Laurie, is it your grandpa? Now what will I do? Well, what if it is? You said you are not afraid of anything. Remember? Said Laurie, laughing. He started laughing and he said, so what if grandpa is there? You said that you are not afraid of anyone. But it was only the doctor who had come to check on Laurie. So who it was? It was Laurie's doctor who had come to check him. Would you mind if I left you for a minute? Laurie asked. So what Laurie asked Jo? That I hope I can go and leave you for a minute. Jo shook her head and went off to look at a portrait of old Mr. Lawrence. So what did Jo do? She shook her head and she said, okay, you can go. Children, what is the meaning of portrait? Portrait means painting. Any painting or drawing. Okay. So she went to see an old picture of a painting of Mr. Lawrence. She was still standing before the portrait when the door opened again. So she was just standing in front of the portrait of Mr. Lawrence, that was Laurie's grandfather, and she was watching it. And that time only the door opened. Jo did not turn as she said, I won't be afraid of your grandpa. So Jo, she did not turn. Okay. And she said, she thought that it is Laurie standing there. And she, without looking also at the back, she said, I'm not scared of your grandpa. He looks stern, but he has kind eyes and I like him. Stern means serious and strict. So she said, I'm not scared of your grandfather. He looks serious and strict, but he has kind eyes and I like him. Thank you, ma'am, said a gruff voice behind her. Gruff means, children, rough and low voice. And there, to Jo's great dismay, stood old Mr. Lawrence. Dismay means a mix of alarm and shame when something unexpected happens. And then what voice came? A very rough and low voice came saying, thank you, ma'am. Who was that standing? That was Mr. Lawrence, that is Laurie's grandfather. And Jo, she just turned and she was having a mixed feeling. And she was shocked also, she was scared also because they never knew each other, no? And she was at his place. Mr. Lawrence is very amused and invites Jo to tea. So Mr. Lawrence, he is very happy with Jo and he invites her for tea. There, as Jo and Laurie talk merrily, Mr. Lawrence realizes how lonely Laurie had been and decides to send him to the March's house occasionally. So then what happens, children? Mr. Lawrence, that is Laurie's grandfather, he watches Jo and Laurie talking merrily, very happily, like Laurie was very happy talking to Jo. So he realized that how lonely Laurie was and he decides to send Laurie occasionally to March's house, that is Jo's house. Okay, children? So here we finish with the explanation. I want you all to read this lesson and I'll be giving you all the question answers. Please write it in your copies. Thank you.